In every quiet neighborhood, behind trimmed hedges and friendly smiles, there are lines. Lines we're all expected to respect. Property lines, boundaries, rules. But what happens when someone decides those lines don't apply to them? Ethan Hale moved to Willowcrest for peace. A place to raise his son, mow his lawn, and leave the noise of the world behind. But one parked car, one cracked window, one smug HOA chairwoman. That's all it took to ignite a quiet war. This isn't just a story about grass or bylaws. It's about the fight for fairness, the cost of silence, and how one man's refusal to back down changed an entire community. The first time Ethan Hale saw the Range Rover parked on his front lawn, he thought it was a mistake. It was early morning in Ashmont, Colorado, a quiet, pine-swept community tucked just far enough from the city to feel like peace. Ethan, a 42-year-old former military officer turned high school biology teacher, stood barefoot on his porch, coffee mug in hand, and stared at the gleaming black SUV. Its tires were half buried in the soil he'd spent hours seeding just 2 weeks ago. His lawn, neat, green, precise, now bore the jagged imprint of strangers. He narrowed his eyes. No note, no apology, just rubber, dust, and disrespect. For a few minutes, Ethan didn't move. His wife, Melissa, still asleep inside. His son, Caleb, snoring beneath his dinosaur blanket. And here he was, trying to compute what kind of person saw a perfect lawn and thought, yeah, this looks like parking. At first, Ethan did what reasonable people do. He walked across the street to where the car obviously came from, a newly renovated Spanish-style house owned by a man he hadn't officially met yet. That morning he would. Vincent Romero opened the door shirtless, holding a protein shake in one hand and a phone in the other. His smile was broad, polished, fake. "Morning," Ethan said, cool but polite. "Is that your car on my lawn?" Vincent barely glanced across the street. "Yeah, man. Street's a mess. Contractors coming in and out all morning." "I'll move it later," Ethan blinked. "Respectfully, I need you to move it now. That's my property." Vincent raised an eyebrow, as if Ethan had said something foreign. "It's just grass, dude," he said. "It'll grow back." That's when something inside Ethan tightened. Something deep, quiet, old. The kind of coil forged in war zones and sleepless nights, and the stubborn grit of knowing when to fight and when to hold. "Move it," Ethan said, voice firm. Vincent laughed under his breath and shut the door in his face. Ethan stood there for a moment longer, then turned around and walked home. That night, over dinner, he told Melissa about it. She pursed her lips and shook her head. "Let it go," she said gently. "We just moved in. We don't want trouble." But Ethan couldn't sleep. Not because of the grass, because of what it symbolized. The small line between civility and entitlement, between a neighborhood and a system rigged to favor the loudest voice in the room. The next day, the Range Rover was gone, but deep tire tracks remained. Ugly, black scars on something Ethan had tried to make beautiful. He filed a complaint with the Willowcrest Homeowners Association. Nothing dramatic, just an email, sent to the contact address listed on the HOA's welcome packet. Violation of property use, unauthorized parking, requesting HOA mediation. 2 days later, he got a response, short, cold, signed by Beverly Klein, HOA chairwoman. "Mr. Hale, thank you for your message. In the interest of maintaining neighborhood harmony, we encourage all residents to resolve minor disputes informally. This issue does not currently fall under actionable HOA jurisdiction. Warm regards, B. Klein." Ethan stared at the message. His mouth twitched. Minor dispute. That phrase sat like acid on his tongue. The next week, the SUV returned. This time, Vincent parked it half on the grass, half on the sidewalk, and revved the engine for a good 30 seconds before cutting it off, like punctuation. A deliberate message. The kind of behavior that wasn't passive-aggressive. It was just aggressive. Ethan installed a camera. He didn't tell Melissa, didn't want her to worry. But deep down, he knew this wasn't about a car. This was about something else. Something harder to name, but easier to feel. This is a test, Ethan thought, and I've passed too many to fail this one. The third time it happened, Ethan called HOA directly. This time, he asked to meet in person. He showed up at the HOA office, a converted garage behind Beverly Klein's sprawling two-story house, in a pressed shirt and holding printed photos of the SUV and the damage it caused. Beverly met him at the door, all pearls and posture. She smiled the way people do when they're about to insult you politely. "I reviewed your emails, Mr. Hale," she said, ushering him into a folding chair. "And frankly, I think you're making a bigger issue of this than necessary." Ethan slid the photos across the table. "This is not minor. He's on my land, repeatedly. I've spoken to him directly. He refuses to stop." Beverly didn't even look at the images. She clasped her hands on the table. "We are a community, Mr. Hale," she said slowly, as if speaking to a child. "And communities thrive on tolerance. A little grass damage is hardly worth disrupting the harmony we work so hard to maintain." Ethan leaned forward. "Is that how you'd feel if he parked on your lawn?" Her smile vanished, only for a second. "I'm advising you to drop this." Ethan stood. "I'm advising you not to underestimate me." And with that, he left. That night, Vincent dumped a bag of fast food trash onto Ethan's lawn. The camera caught it all. Ethan watched it in silence, face unreadable. Then, calmly, he uploaded the footage to a secure drive, logged the incident, dated it, labeled the file. Property violation 03, escalation. Melissa came into the room. "Ethan, is this going to get worse?" He looked at her, softened. "It might," he said, "but I've got it under control." He didn't tell her the part that scared him, that the system meant to protect them, the HOA, the rules, the leaders, wasn't just broken. It had been hijacked. And he was done playing by their rules. The following week, Ethan came home to find a crack running down the length of his front window, like a lightning bolt etched into glass. There was no rock, no note, just silence, a silent threat. He stared at the jagged fracture, jaw tightening, heart pounding. His instincts screamed retaliation, and he already knew who was behind it. But he also knew there'd be no proof, not yet. That night, he rewatched the camera footage from the trash dumping incident, frame by frame. He studied the angle of Vincent's throw, the cocky swagger in his walk, but nothing that would hold up in court, not enough to push the police into action. That's when Ethan realized this wasn't just going to be about right and wrong. It was going to be about evidence, strategy, and endurance. So he doubled down. More cameras, a dash cam in his car. He even installed a motion-activated light system around his yard. Melissa watched in quiet worry, but didn't question him. Not anymore. 2 days later, Ethan stepped out onto his porch and found something far worse than garbage or vandalism, a notice from the HOA. It was pinned to his door in plastic laminate, with the Willow Crest HOA seal in the corner, and a bright red title that read, "Violation Warning, Unauthorized Surveillance Equipment." He stared at it in disbelief. According to the document, his cameras violated community privacy protocols and would need to be removed within 7 days, or he'd face a fine of $250 per day. Beneath the warning, in tiny print, was a signature, Beverly Klein, HOA chairwoman. His hands trembled slightly as he pulled the notice down. It wasn't just Vincent anymore. Now the system was turning against him. At the next HOA community meeting, held at the local library, Ethan showed up 15 minutes early. He didn't speak. He sat in the second row, quiet, calm, watching. Beverly arrived last. She wore her usual tailored beige blazer, with a matching folder clutched to her chest like a shield. Vincent wasn't on the board, but he sat in the back of the room, arms folded, legs stretched arrogantly into the aisle. As the meeting began, Beverly made a point to address the growing tension in our community in Bon Nomad. We've received reports of excessive surveillance, unfriendly behavior, and a general disregard for community peace, she announced. Let's remember, Willow Crest is built on trust, not hostility. Ethan raised his hand. Beverly paused. Mr. Hale? I'd like to ask a question, Ethan said. His voice was calm, controlled. Are repeated violations of property lines considered hostile? Or just parking convenience? A few heads turned. Beverly's smile thinned. We're not here to single anyone out. No, Ethan said, standing. We're here to protect people's rights. But it seems those rights only apply if you're part of the inner circle. The room went still. Vincent chuckled from the back, low and mocking. Beverly quickly moved on to the next item. But the damage was done, and Ethan could feel it. A few neighbors looked at him differently now. Not with pity, but with curiosity, some with sympathy. It was the beginning of a shift. Small, but real. That night, Ethan sat on the porch staring at the yard that had become his battlefield. Melissa brought him a beer and sat beside him, their knees just touching. You okay? She asked quietly. He nodded, but didn't answer right away. Then, after a long pause, he said, You know what's the hardest part? It's not the car. It's not even the crack in the window. He looked out into the dark. It's that I actually believed this place would be different. Melissa said nothing. She just reached over and squeezed his hand. In that silence, Ethan made a decision. He wasn't going to wait for justice to come. He was going to find it. And if necessary, drag it into the light himself. 3 nights after the HOA meeting, Ethan sat at his kitchen table with a stack of papers, a legal pad, and his laptop glowing in the dim light. The house was quiet. Melissa and Caleb were asleep. But his mind was electric. He'd spent the last few hours combing through every HOA rulebook, community guideline, and city ordinance he could find. He read lines 3 times over, cross-referenced paragraphs, highlighted, circled, drew arrows, and underlined dates. And that's when something strange popped out. A single line in the Willow Crest HOA charter, dated 2011. Revised per Resolution B 4.6, Section 7.1. Board discretion on enforcement. He blinked. Resolution B 4.6. Why did that sound familiar? He flipped to the appendix. No Resolution B 4.6 was listed. No link, no footnote. It was like the revision existed, but the actual vote didn't. His gut told him this wasn't a mistake. It was a cover. The next day, Ethan took a detour during lunch break at school and drove to the county records office downtown. The building was old and quiet. Rows of microfilm, boxes of dusty folders, and one elderly clerk named Rita who greeted him with a tired smile. Looking for HOA files? She asked. Y'all always come in pairs. Which neighborhood? Willow Crest, Ethan said, raising an eyebrow. Wait, someone else came asking? She nodded. A woman, maybe mid-30s. Red hair, quiet. She came in last month asking about amendments. Ethan's curiosity sparked. Grace. He didn't know her name yet, but he would soon. Rita wheeled out the file drawer and helped him dig. It took half an hour, but they found it. A printed scan of the original HOA charter from 2005, and then a smaller folder with revisions over time. The 2011 document, still there, but now in full detail, and it confirmed his suspicion. Board discretion on enforcement shall allow chairperson to override standard disciplinary processes when deemed necessary for the community's benefit. It was vague, broad, dangerous, and most importantly, it required a 2-3 vote from the homeowners to be approved. There was no record of a vote. Ethan took photos of every page, every signature. He emailed copies to himself, saved them on a flash drive, and made a backup in the cloud. Then, he called the HOA secretary listed on the earliest version of the charter, Grace Dunning. She picked up after the second ring. Hello? Hi, Ethan said cautiously. You don't know me, but I think we've both been burned by Beverly Klein. Silence. Then Grace exhaled. Go on. They met that evening at a quiet cafe across town. Grace, in her mid-30s, wore no makeup, no jewelry, just jeans and a windbreaker. She looked like someone who had stopped caring what others thought a long time ago. I lived in Willowcrest for 8 years, she said. I was secretary for 4 of them, until Beverly turned it into her own fiefdom. Ethan listened as Grace told him everything. Beverly had bullied out the old board one by one. Vincent was her cousin, not just a realtor, but also the silent beneficiary of a development fund Beverly created. That fund, built from unexplained HOA dues, increases, and fines, like the one Ethan received for his cameras. Grace had tried to stop it, questioned the missing votes, demanded transparency. So a month later, her home was cited for landscaping violations, then structural issues. She was fined $800 and threatened with lien paperwork. She moved out 3 months later. They erased me, Grace said, like I never existed. Ethan was quiet for a long time. Then he leaned forward. What if I could prove they never had the votes to pass that amendment? Grace gave a bitter smile. Then you wouldn't just have a property dispute, you'd have fraud, and maybe even criminal charges. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. His thoughts churned like a storm. Vincent's smug grin, Beverly's soft voice saying, "Let it go," the crack in his window, the red ink on the warning letter, the silence at the community meeting. He saw it all clearly now. This wasn't about a man parking where he shouldn't. It was about power and control, and the illusion of order that some people use to cover up corruption. He looked out his bedroom window at the security lights glowing softly in his yard, and for the first time in weeks, he smiled, because now, he wasn't just defending his lawn. He was going to bring down the whole rotten tree. Ethan wasn't a man of spectacle. He didn't crave the spotlight. But after weeks of watching HOA chairwoman Beverly Klein manipulate rules, ignore evidence, and weaponize the bylaws against him and others, he knew one thing. This wasn't going to end with another polite email. It would take strategy and precision. Step 1. Documentation. Back in his garage, Ethan cleared the clutter off his workbench and laid out everything like a military mission file. Printouts of the original and revised HOA charters, the missing voting records, the photos of Beverly's forged signature pages, and the photos he had taken of the original archive stamp from the county. He added his own documentation, a log of the 3 times Vincent's car had damaged his lawn, footage of the trash dumping, screenshots from Beverly's HOA violation letter regarding the cameras, the clip from the HOA meeting where she publicly belittled his concerns. Then came the biggest piece, Grace's sworn statement. She had typed it out, notarized it, and signed it. In it, she listed not only the timeline of her being pushed out, but also the internal emails Beverly had sent at the time, subtly pressuring other board members to vote her way or else. "Well, I don't want revenge," Grace had told him before handing him the folder. "I just want the truth to matter again." Step 2. Allies. Ethan knew he couldn't take on the system alone, but the cracks were already showing. After his last HOA meeting outburst, a few neighbors had stopped by his house under the guise of casual conversation. First was Mr. Langley, the elderly Vietnam vet 2 houses down. He told Ethan, "Son, I saw that woman shut down my wife's backyard shed project 3 years ago. Said it violated shade rules. But Vincent's short-term rental 3 doors over? No problem. I knew something smelled." Then came Nina Torres, a single mom who lived on the east end of the cul-de-sac. She quietly shared that her HOA fees had jumped by 40% in 2 years, with no explanation. Only a vague beautification budget that never seemed to touch her part of the street. Finally, there was Alan Chu, an accountant who had long suspected financial irregularities. He offered to run the numbers on the HOA's last 3 public reports. What he found shocked them all. Over $48,000 in miscellaneous expenditures had been funneled into a development initiative headed by Beverly, without any line item breakdown or vote logs. Misuse of funds, Allen said. If we show this at a community meeting, she's done. Step 3. Public pressure. The final piece of Ethan's plan wasn't in a document. It was in the community's perception. He needed the people to see the truth before Beverly could spin it again. He started small. One Sunday morning, Ethan and Melissa hosted a community coffee hour in their front yard. Just some muffins, thermoses, and folding chairs. No agenda. But he slipped printed flyers, polite, factual, neutral, into mailboxes the day before. They were titled, "Understanding Our HOA, What You Might Not Know About Our Charter and Finances." 20 people came, 30 the next weekend. Ethan didn't point fingers. He just showed comparisons between the original bylaws and the mysterious amendments. He asked gentle questions like, "Did you know we never voted on this?" Or, "Have you ever received a full breakdown of where your dues go?" Neighbors started talking, then murmuring, then asking for copies. It was like watching a forest dry out. One spark, and the whole place would light up. Step 4. The stage. It all led to this, the next quarterly HOA meeting. Ethan requested, as a resident, to add an item to the agenda: concerns regarding transparency and governance. He received a terse confirmation from Beverly's office. The tone was clipped, formal, defensive. She knew something was coming. What she didn't know was how deep the roots of her power had begun to rot, and how many people were finally ready to speak. The night before the meeting, Ethan stood in his garage, flipping through his binder one last time. Melissa came in and leaned on the doorframe, arms folded. "You ready?" she asked. "I think so," Ethan said, but his voice carried the weight of something more. Not nerves, not fear, conviction. "I'm not doing this for me anymore," he added. "I'm doing it because no one else should have to be treated like this." Melissa smiled. "Then let's bring the house down." It was a crisp Thursday evening when Ethan arrived at the Willowcrest HOA meeting. He parked 1 block away, not because there was no room, but because he wanted the walk. He needed the quiet. Clutched in his hand was a thick, black binder, worn at the edges, filled with every page of evidence he had collected. Not just of personal grievances, but systemic misconduct. This wasn't about a lawn anymore. This was about power, abuse, and silence. As he stepped into the town hall room at the Ashmont Public Library, he saw the chairs were already filling up, nearly 4 times the usual attendance. Word had gotten around. Some sat with arms crossed, others with furrowed brows. But more than anything, there was something new in the air: anticipation. At the front, Beverly Klein sat poised in her usual pastel suit, lips pressed into a smile too thin to be warm. Vincent sat to her left, not officially on the board, but as always within whispering distance of influence. "Let's begin," Beverly chirped. "Welcome, everyone. We're here to discuss community development, maintenance allocations, and a concern raised by one of our residents, Mr. Ethan Hale." She turned to Ethan with a look of thinly veiled disdain. "Mr. Hale, the floor is yours. Please be brief." Ethan stood. He didn't look angry. He looked calm, centered, like a man who had already seen the end of the story. "Thank you, chairwoman," he said. "I'll keep it simple. What I have to say tonight isn't about me. It's about all of you. All of us." He walked to the center, slowly opening his binder. "Over the last 2 months, I've been investigating a pattern of behavior within our HOA. Patterns that include financial mismanagement, unauthorized amendments to our charter, and targeted harassment against specific residents." He lifted the first page, a copy of the original HOA charter from 2005, and projected it onto the screen behind him. Then he showed the 2011 revision, with the now infamous Resolution B4.6, the one that gave Beverly unchecked discretion. And yet, he said, turning to the room. There is no record of a community vote to approve this amendment, which, as per our own bylaws, is required. A murmur swept through the crowd. Ethan continued. Next came the expenditure report, annotated by accountant Alan Chu, showing $48,000 in miscellaneous development funds that had no traceable public trail. Then a copy of a check made out to Romero Realty, Vincent's firm. Vincent's face darkened. "That's slander," he hissed. "No," Ethan replied, flipping to the next slide. "It's accounting, and it's your name on the receipt." But it wasn't until Ethan pulled out his trump card that the room truly shifted. He hit play on a short audio recording, Beverly's voice, clear and sharp. "I don't care about protocol. I'll push this through with or without a vote. If they want transparency, they can look somewhere else." Gasps echoed. A few people turned to stare at Beverly. One woman in the front row dropped her pen. Beverly's face paled. "Taken out of context," she said quickly. "That was a private conversation, likely recorded without..." "Under Colorado's single-party consent law," Ethan cut in, "this recording is legal and admissible." He turned to the crowd. "I'm not asking you to believe me out of loyalty. I'm asking you to look at the documents, follow the money, see the truth for yourself." Then he stepped back. Silence. Tension. Then, "Is this why our street hasn't been resurfaced in 3 years?" someone asked aloud. "And why my fines doubled with no explanation?" another added. Beverly's voice trembled. "Please, let's keep this orderly." "No, let's keep it honest," Mr. Langley growled from the back. What followed was chaos, but necessary chaos. Residents stood, questioned, accused. Voices rose. Some shouted, some cried. Beverly tried to restore order, banging her pen on the table, but it was too late. Her power, once absolute, was fracturing in real time. And in the center of the storm, Ethan said nothing more. He didn't need to. His job was done. That night, the HOA meeting ended early. For the first time in a decade, an emergency vote was held to suspend Beverly's authority pending an internal audit. She stormed out without a word. Vincent followed, muttering curses under his breath. And as people gathered outside in the cool evening air, something remarkable happened. Neighbors who had barely spoken before were now shaking hands, forming circles, exchanging numbers. They were talking about what came next. A new vote, a new board, a new beginning. And at the edge of the crowd, Ethan stood with Melissa and Caleb, watching. Melissa touched his arm. "You did it." Ethan shook his head. "We did it. And it's just starting." The meeting room at Ashmont Library had never been this full. Extra chairs lined the walls. Some residents stood in the back. Others leaned against door frames, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Whispers filled the air. Low, curious, electric. They had heard the rumors. Now they came to see if they were true. At exactly 6:30 p.m., Beverly Klein stepped to the podium. She wore confidence, like perfume. Too strong, too deliberate. "Good evening," she began with a practiced smile. "Let's call this quarterly meeting of the Willowcrest HOA to order. As always, I want to thank you all for participating in this beautiful community we've built together." A few claps followed, scattered, obligatory, but most waited. Everyone knew this wasn't a regular meeting. And Beverly knew it too. She gestured to Ethan. "As requested, Mr. Hale has prepared a brief presentation. We'll allow 10 minutes, then we'll move on." 10 minutes. He almost smiled. He wouldn't need that long. Ethan stepped forward, calm, methodical. He wore a navy button-down, sleeves rolled, binder in hand. His voice was low, but clear. "This won't take long," he said. "But it may take something far more important, your attention." He clicked his remote. Behind him, a projector flickered to life, displaying a split-screen image. On the left, the original HOA charter from 2005. On the right, the current revision from 2011. "I've spent the last month comparing these documents," Ethan said, "line by line. And something strange happened in 2000. He pointed to the clause. Resolution B 4.6 grants discretionary enforcement power to the chairperson, bypassing community votes. A few heads turned. Murmurs began. But when I went to the county archives, Ethan continued, flipping the page, there was no evidence this amendment was ever voted on. No signatures, no announcement, just a change. He clicked again. Now, the projector showed a scanned receipt. $8,500 paid to Romero Realty Group from the HOA's Development Initiative Fund. Vincent, sitting quietly in the second row, stiffened. That payment, Ethan said, came from the same budget line used to fine residents like Ms. Torres here, who was charged $600 for a flower bed too wide, by 3 inches. Gasps erupted. Nina, in the back row, nodded silently. Let me be clear, Ethan said. This isn't just about bad leadership. It's about fraud, manipulation, and the abuse of a system meant to serve us. He clicked one final time. And Beverly's voice echoed through the speakers. They won't check, just get the document signed. Who's going to question me? Dead silence followed. Then the whispers started. What the hell? She really said that? Is this legal? Beverly stood, knocking her chair backward. This is an ambush, she barked. A smear campaign. This man has been obsessed from day one, planting cameras, hosting backyard gossip sessions. Someone stood up. Mr. Langley. I served in Vietnam, Beverly, he said calmly. And I've seen power abused before. This stinks. Another voice. You told me I couldn't paint my shutters dark blue because it disrupted visual harmony. But Vincent's short-term rental is okay? Beverly's jaw clenched. I've always acted in the interest of this community. Did you act in our interest when you used HOA funds to pay your cousin? Alan Chu asked from the front. Because I ran the books. And your discretionary fund? It's untraceable past the first vendor. Gasps again. More voices. Beverly backed away from the podium. Her face turned pale. I'll be contacting legal, she muttered. You do that, someone called out. We'll be contacting the district attorney. By the end of the night, 2/3 of the room had signed a motion to suspend Beverly, pending investigation. A special election was scheduled. Vincent stormed out before the vote even began. Outside, the air was brisk, fresh, free. Neighbors stood in clusters, some shaking their heads, some smiling for the first time in weeks. A few came up to Ethan, thanking him, clapping him on the back, offering to help. Grace stood nearby, watching with a quiet pride. You did it, she said simply. Ethan looked around at the growing crowd. No, he replied. We did. 2 weeks after the vote to suspend Beverly Klein, the signs of change were everywhere. Her nameplate had been quietly removed from the HOA office door. The mailbox in front of her house, once painted gold, was now plain white. The whispering that once surrounded Ethan at neighborhood gatherings had been replaced by nods, smiles, and the occasional homemade pie left on his porch. But Ethan didn't celebrate with noise. He celebrated with silence, the kind that returns when chaos fades. He stood on his front lawn one morning, sipping his coffee, barefoot on the grass he'd fought to protect. The lines of the tire tracks were long gone. In their place, small green blades pushed upward, stronger than ever. Melissa came out, her robe wrapped tightly, and leaned into him. They're voting tonight, she said. New board, you going? Ethan nodded. I think I have to. She looked up at him. You know they're going to nominate you. He chuckled. God help us all. That evening, in the same meeting room where voices once clashed, the Willowcrest community gathered again. This time, no shouting, no posturing. Just ballots, handshakes, and a line of neighbors ready to try again. Ethan declined the nomination for chair. I'd rather teach photosynthesis to teenagers, he joked, but agreed to serve on the compliance committee, where he could ensure fairness was more than just a slogan. Nina Torres was elected board president. Alan Chu took over finances. Even Mr. Langley signed on as community liaison. To keep things real, he said. And somewhere, silently, power shifted back to the people. Meanwhile, the investigation into Beverly and Vincent continued. The County Ethics Board launched a formal review after Grace submitted sworn affidavits, and Ethan provided all documentation. Beverly was found guilty of violating multiple HOA governance codes and ordered to repay over $38,000 in misused funds. Vincent lost his real estate license following revelations of backroom dealings and failure to disclose conflicts of interest. He quietly put his house up for sale and left the state within the month. No jail time, no headlines. But their power? Gone. Their control? Dismantled. One Saturday morning, a neighborhood cleanup day was organized, something Beverly had always resisted, calling it liability exposure. This time, nearly everyone showed up. Lawn bags lined the curbs. Children ran with rakes twice their size. Ethan helped repaint a broken picket fence, his hands stained white, his shirt blotched with dust and sweat. And yet, he'd never felt lighter. At the end of the day, as dusk fell, Nina stood on a folding chair and called for a moment of recognition. "To the man who reminded us that silence is the enemy of progress," she said, raising her glass. "Thank you, Ethan." Cheers followed. He nodded, overwhelmed. Not because of the praise, but because of what it meant. He wasn't just the man who stopped a car from parking on his lawn. He was the one who helped reclaim a community's voice. Later that night, Ethan sat alone on the porch. The crickets were back. The wind rustled the hedges. Melissa had tucked Caleb in, and all was quiet. He leaned back in his chair, eyes half closed. The porch light flickered softly, and for the first time in a long while, he finally felt home.